So hi, hello, and welcome again. Microbehunter here, all over here. Well, in this Microscopy podcast, I like to answer questions that I receive from my viewers. Usually the questions are posted beneath the YouTube video in the comments section. Sometimes I also receive a few questions per email. And every now and then I make a YouTube video like this one over here where I answer you, where I answer your questions. But today I thought of something different because I asked ChatGPT to ask me some questions that I could cover. And I just want to read out the prompt because I consider it quite interesting, the response that I got here. So this is basically what I typed into ChatGPT. Are there any content gaps in your neural network? Is there anything you would like to know? So that's basically what I asked. And ChatGPT responded, great meta question for a podcast. Here's a brief answer you could give. Yes, I know a lot, but I'm not perfect. Here's where I struggle. New info, I don't always know the latest events unless updated through external tools. Well, that's fair enough, obviously, because the neural network was trained by the company, and of course, the newest information is not present in the neural network. Also, we basically know that. So the second one is niche topics. Some rare or obscure research isn't well covered. Also fair enough. If it's not there out there, then of course you cannot train the neural network. But the last 2 points are kind of interesting here. And ChatGPT responded, it doesn't know a lot about personal experience. I don't have senses, intuition, or emotions, so I can't know, under quotation marks, like a human. So this is basically referring to the personal experience and this personal knowledge that we humans have, that of course a machine cannot have. Also fair enough. And then the last one, visuals. I can describe images, but I don't actually see or interpret them the way humans do. Also fair enough. So far really nothing unusual here. But then it goes on. Things I'd like to know if I were curious like a human. What it feels like to look through a microscope and suddenly discover something moving. How people emotionally connect with microbes. Are they amazed, grossed out, or curious? And what people imagine when they see a paramecium for the first time. I had problems understanding that, so I asked the follow-up question. And what questions people don't ask but should when learning microbiology. And then it goes on. You could even turn this into an episode, like things ChatGPT wishes it could feel or ask. Okay, yeah, so that's basically where we are right now. And then I said the following. I typed in, I don't understand your question. And then quote, what people imagine when they see a paramecium for the first time. Why should they imagine anything when they're able to see it? Please clarify. So this is something that I typed. And then ChatGPT responded, a good catch, let me clarify. When I said what people imagine when they see a paramecium for the first time, I meant what associations or thoughts pop into their heads. Do they think it looks like a tiny alien? It's like a vacuum cleaner. It reminds me of a submarine. Even though they're seeing it, humans often interpret new visuals through imagination, metaphors, or comparisons to familiar things. I was referring to that moment of creative or emotional response, not imagining in place of seeing, but alongside it. So this is quite an interesting response here, because I don't know, when I look at something under the microscope and I see a paramecium or any other microorganism there, I don't make metaphors really. Maybe this is something that children do. I don't know. But normally what I think is because you already have a visual impression, because you are already seeing it, there is no need to have these comparisons. I get where ChatGPT is coming from, why it needs to know these connections is, for example, a paramecium looks like, like oval, right? Elongated, and kind of moving around, and you can compare it to a vacuum cleaner, this robot vacuum cleaners or lawnmowers that are kind of cleaning up the area or cutting the grass. That's of course an analogy or metaphor that one could have. Actually, analogy is the better term here. And because it's oval, you would not think about an asteroid circling the sun in an oval manner, right? Obviously, these associations we don't have, right? Even though an asteroid circling the sun is also kind of elliptical, and a paramecium kind of looks elliptical as well, oval, but we don't have those associations, obviously. So I kind of get where ChatGPT is coming from here, but I think that these are actually the wrong questions because we don't really ask these things. At least I don't do that. Yeah, it looks like a tiny alien. I have to admit, with a tiny alien, even I compared once rotifers in one of my previous videos. I said, yeah, look, there's no need to look for alien life out there because we already have aliens, so to say, yeah, under the microscope. Because why go across half of the universe to find aliens that almost look like humans if you just basically just put some water sample under the microscope and you see the craziest and weirdest organisms, yeah, that are very unhuman-like. No need to go across the universe to find interesting life forms. You just have them under the microscope. So yeah, I even the comparison with aliens, even I have made, right? But I think the bigger lesson that we have here is the following: that I think when we look at things under the microscope, or when we actually see them, there is, I think, no need anymore to make these comparisons, right? And I don't know, I've never thought about microorganisms and I've never compared them to vacuum cleaners or to submarines. And I think that these metaphors or analogies are probably more suitable, I don't know, if you want to explain certain things maybe to children, because as soon as you're a little bit older already, and if you see these things yourself personally, then you basically already have an impression there, and you just take it for what it is. Yeah. So. And the last question is actually also quite interesting. It's about questions that people should ask about microbiology or microorganisms and often don't ask. And this actually indeed is quite a comprehensive list that I got here. And I have to tell you, I'm going to read out a couple of these questions, but honestly, I don't know if I'm able to directly answer them. But some of them are, and some of them I already talked about. Just a selection here because the list is fairly long. So yeah, on the nature of microorganisms, for example, what makes a microbe, under quotation marks, alive? Where is the line? And that's actually a very interesting question, and I consider maybe the question of when is something alive. Actually, there are certain criteria that are established for that, and yeah, for example, the presence of a metabolism and so on. Yeah? Viruses are not considered alive because they do not have their own metabolism, are not able to reproduce on their own. Therefore, strictly speaking, are not organisms in the classical sense, because organisms have to be alive, right? Microbes are basically based on cells which have their own metabolism, which viruses do not have. Viruses are not cells. But if you actually dig in a little bit deeper, indeed the question of what's alive and not alive is if you go a little bit into philosophy, a little bit more complicated. It's a little bit like asking, the question of is a virus alive is a little bit like asking, is Pluto a planet or not? And in some cases, these things are discussed quite emotionally, but among the biologists, there's a scientific consensus that viruses are not alive. Yeah. What can't we see under a light microscope, and why? Yeah, so that's going more into the technical direction. How does the way we grow microbes affect what we learn about them? That's really, honestly, this is such a deep question, and because our laboratory techniques that we have indeed influence the questions that we can ask and the things that we can know. Right? There are so many microorganisms out there that cannot be grown in a lab. I've already made a podcast episode about that. As a matter of fact, the vast majority of bacteria cannot be grown in a lab, but we know that they exist because of direct DNA studies. So essentially, there is a whole, I wouldn't say world out there, a whole universe out there in nature about microorganisms that we are simply not able to study because we do not have the techniques yet to study them. On human impact and bias, why do we mostly study disease-causing microbes? Well, because they have a direct impact on our health, yeah, and because there is a direct, medical relevancy for those. So that's actually a weird question because that's kind of obvious, I think, yeah. And the next one, I actually want to talk a little bit longer about how does our cultural fear of germs influence microbiology research and public health. And I would like to expand on that a little bit. And that's a little bit the unfortunate thing that we hobby microscopists and hobby biologists sometimes have to fight or struggle with. And that is indeed that when people think, that's kind of interesting, when people think of a scientist, also in culturally and in the public media and the public sphere. I mean, advertisements, for example, if you think of a scientist, it's usually a guy in a white lab coat, and there's somewhere a microscope standing next to it, right? Rarely a telescope. It's always a microscope, right? So this is kind of notable. Maybe also as practical applications because microscopes are kind of small and can be put easily on a table. Telescopes sometimes are too large, maybe, so maybe there are some video editing and filming considerations here as well. But generally, very often when people have associations with microbiology, microscopy, and so on, of course, indeed, there's immediately the association with bacteria, germs, and dirtiness, something being dirty, diseases. So it's somewhat negatively connotated, which is not the case with astronomy so much, right? So I would say that is a little bit one of the things that we hobby microscopists have to struggle a little bit is the general negative connotation. And also, even if you check my YouTube channel, those videos that are most popular and most watched, face mites, for example. Oh, there are face mites growing in your hair follicles, and then people click on the video and it's kind of gross and disgusting. And occasionally some pimple popping videos where people like to watch that as well. I usually try to make the videos in such a way that you actually able to see the white blood cells to make it at least a little bit educational. But it is this emotional response actually that's so important. And in many cases, unfortunately, the emotional response to microscopy and so on is not so much wow, discovery and the mysterious nature and how many life forms are out there. Usually, it's always in association with either complicated science. Difficult science and advanced research, or medical problems, infectious diseases. Yeah? So that is a little bit of a problem. And of course, these negative associations are not always present. For example, when you talk about astronomy, the universe, black holes, stars, cool. Yeah. So this space travel. Yeah? So this is a little bit the different, how do you say, approach or attitude, rather, maybe is the better word that people have towards microscopy compared to astronomy. Yeah. So and then there are a couple of more questions that ChatGPT responded to, questions that people could ask. What would Earth be like without microbes? I generally don't like those what if type of questions, because the environment is complex. Yeah. Can microbes think or make decisions in some way? Very easy answer here. Definitely not in the classical sense, because thinking and decision making are dependent on nervous systems, and microorganisms being single celled. They do not have complex. They don't have a nervous system. Yeah, and you have only microscopic animals. They, like tardigrades, for example, they have a very simple nervous system, but not really a fully developed brain. So essentially, the concept of thinking and decision-making are very human-like concepts that I think should not be transferred to other, especially not microorganisms. However, it is correct that some responses that some microorganisms seem to make seem on the outside to be intelligent, right? And for this reason, it might appear like, oh, they're kind of smart, but actually they're not. It's just a natural response, or that ultimately a reflex-like response that some microanimals have, and in the case of certain behavior that seems to be intelligent in microorganisms, like for example bacteria moving towards oxygen and so on, that can be explained on a very on a basic biochemical level alone as well, without the need of a neural network, basically making complex decisions. Neural network, I mean like a brain. And then the last one, are viruses alive, and then why does it matter? I already talked about that. No, viruses are not considered alive, but I know this is a question of definition of what alive means. You can have a whole philosophical debate on that, but there's now the agreement that viruses are not alive because they're not based on cells, and they do not have their own metabolism, right? So this basically is the response I got from ChatGPT here, and I have to tell you is I'm a little bit positively surprised. I mean, it's a language model, right? So, but still, it's not just the language, but also the content is quite remarkable here as well. And indeed, it provides a lot of, I would say, basis for discussion as well. But I think one of the things that we can learn out of that, and I think that's the important thing, is that and ChatGPT actually mentioned this with two of the points here. Is this the concept of this personal experience, right? And that's also as a biology educator, as a biology teacher, would like to emphasize is why it's so important to also use microscopes and other devices like this also in an educational setting. Of course, I can explain the cell using PowerPoint slides, using drawings, and I do that. We do that. We biology teachers do that. But there is a disconnect, and I think what is really important is that students and people who are interested in the environment, in nature, gain this personal experience. And this personal experience can, of course, be directly obtained not just by looking at pictures that you see online, but by actually putting a slide with some microorganisms, some tissues, whatever, under the microscope and actually observing it yourself. So this is always also a unique experience because, of course, no two water samples or no two slides are exactly the same, right? Unlike, for example, a picture that you've taken and shared over, I don't know, Wikipedia. Of course, these pictures are perfect and properly edited, and the color contrast, and it's really probably better in quality than what you might actually see under the microscope directly. But again, there is this personal connection missing. Simply the natural extension of your own senses. You take a water sample, you go out into nature, you collect a water sample, you put it on the microscope slide, you put it under the microscope. And then you have a direct connection to a different world. And that is, of course, quite different, also from an emotional experience, than, for example, the fact that you just look at a picture that you've downloaded or see on a mobile phone screen or whatever, even though that's much faster to do, right? But you're kind of missing this direct connection here. And I think that's one of the things that also in the future, that's why I think, because I've been asked, will microscopy stay relevant as such? Because, I mean, nowadays you have all of those pictures online, and why not just do a virtual library of microscopic images, of micrographs? And that is, you have all of the cells and microbes that you ever want in a picture library, and just look at those, and then maybe you can even pinch and zoom in, and I don't know, do some kind of a virtual microscopy. And these things already do exist to a certain extent. Yeah, but there is no direct connection to the actual environment that you have. You're just still observing it on a screen. And for this reason, I think microscopes, where you actually put a sample directly under the mic, is going to stay relevant also into the future, right? You might also want to ask a little bit is why has the modern technology, picture libraries? I mean, that's already all possible, and they still have not yet replaced traditional microscopes. In the large scale. So this is in certain specific areas. Maybe if you just want in a medical field, if you, for example, want to share certain images, of course, it's all done. The workflow is all largely also educational use. In some cases, done over picture libraries as well. Very efficient, but still, microscopes still do exist. Right, as a matter of fact, it's if you just look at the companies, microscope companies that are out there, it's not becoming any less, right? And again, I know I'm repeating myself. It's this emotional connection that essentially we have with our environment. That. In this case, ChatGPT cannot have. And we humans can also not have it if you just look at pictures that are published online. So just some thoughts that I have here. I kind of consider it quite interesting what I got as a response here, and indeed I think that if just look at the list, there are actually many more questions here and many more points. I'm actually going to pick up maybe on some of these points in the future as well. I'm just going to leave it at that, and I hope that this episode was a little bit was interesting for you. I wish you all the best. Happy microbe hunting as always, and see you in the next episode. Bye bye.